And then we can play some more later because it's really fun, right? And you can set up private rooms and just invite anybody. Like once you log out, the room is done. So it's really quick and nice and safe. So I strongly recommend, yeah, play that draw source thing with anybody. It's super fun. We can play it another time. Welcome, Kaylin, and welcome to whoever I just clicked in. I didn't even catch it. Kennedy. We've got a lot of people in here today. That's awesome. I'm excited. So today we are going to take a look at technology and art and some of the ways that they go together and incorporate each other, which leads to there being new advances, new ideas, new things, new abilities. So it should be really fun. As always, I love it when you guys participate. So talk it up in the chat, hop it up on the mic, be here, be involved. I'm excited to have you here. Looking forward to it. So one of the first things we want to do is talk about architecture. Architecture is just art that you live in. So it's definitely a part of it. I was feeling a lot of architecture vibes today. And in the lessons, when they start to talk about the post-industrial era, they make mention of the Crystal Palace. And I don't know if you guys are very familiar with this, but it's a really cool part of history and a thing that happens. And that is that there are world fairs. Has anybody ever heard of the World Fair? Like maybe the World Fair in New York or the World Fair that was in Seattle? Okay, so some of the things that we know and are around are from them. The Space Needle was actually built as part of the World Fair in Seattle. And if you remember the opening scenes of Captain America, the First Avenger, they go to the World's Fair that was in New York. There was another World's Fair in New York later. But the first World Fairs in modern history is in London in 1851. And they build, yeah, Lucas, you're so on with me. So they build the Crystal Palace. And for the most part, the fair exhibits are temporary. There are very few permanent structures that are left up from that. And so actually what I wanted us to do is take a look at some of the structures that come out of the World's Fairs and how they are tied to this idea of architecture and what they can do and what can be built now that there is steel, which is a huge, just a game changer in what you can do architecturally. So if you guys can go to the Chicago one, super interesting. I don't want to give all the stuff away. So if you guys click on the link I just put in the chat, it will take you up to my Padlet where we can all look at it. So it should be on the screen now. So if you haven't used a Padlet before, it's a fun way that we can all kind of share what we're looking for. Yes, Mary, the Ferris wheel was built for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. And so that's what I've got here. You should be able to see it on my screen. And they wanted to compete with the Eiffel Tower, which was built at the Paris Fair just a few years before. And so the World's Fair was then in Chicago, and they built this. So if you're using this, if you guys have clicked on my link, so you're over here, if you click on this little plus sign, it'll let you add a new post. So you can say Paris World Fair. It was the first Ferris wheel. And you know the name is from the name of actually the architect. His name was Ferris. And then if you click on this little magnifying thing, it'll take you to Google and you can look for images or videos. So the Eiffel Tower was built for the Paris World Fair. You can put it right up here. So what I thought would be fun to do for the next few minutes is we can look at some of these fairs and find some different information because there's lots of cool trivia, and then just build ourselves a little corkboard here with some interesting stuff. So yeah, we've got one right there. It looks like I built myself twice. So pick a topic: London, 1851, Philadelphia, Paris, or Chicago. Do a little Google search, find an image, and put it up here on the board where we can all look at it. Does that make sense? There we go. I've got some people in on that. And to help us in the fun, I also rigged up some fair background music for us, so we're not just sitting here in awkward silence. Welcome, Katie. So let's see if that works. Can you guys hear my background fair music? Okay, cool. So we've got that. And then we got our paddle board. So I've got two things up here. What I want you guys to do is put my board, focus on your Well, it's not scary. I promise nothing's going to come out of any brains or speakers to get us. I just thought it would be a little bit fun. Oh, let me see if I can mine. Is that better, Jocelyn? Okay, thanks. So the World's Fair were a way that nations could kind of spotlight what was going on with them, what their advances were, what their resources were. And like the London's World Fair is where we see the Crystal Palace. So hopefully someone is finding me an image of the Crystal Palace to put on that board. Remember, the link is up in the chat box. I'll put it in again. Click on the link and you guys can add images and text to our board so we can get some good World Fair stuff. And it was so popular, the World Exhibition in London, that other cities started competing to have them. And they would hold the World's Fair. We planned out years in advance. And as Lucas mentioned earlier, the event itself was meant to be temporary. So they would build up basically a city within whatever city was hosting it and feature art, obviously, architecture, but science and new technology, and also showcase culture and ideas from around the world. So it was a really big thing. So the London one happens, and then America hosts the next one. Why would Philadelphia perhaps be the choice if America's hosting the World's Fair in, that should be 1876? What's the significance of that? Yes, yes, it was the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It was the first centennial, which is a big deal. I don't know if there was one in Germany in the 18th century. I'm going to say no. There might have been one since the Cold War ended. We'd have to look because they actually still happen. There was a World's Fair in Hong Kong in 2010. So they're less of the event that they were in the 19th century, simply because we have more ways of getting the information out. These first World Fairs really were the way that everyone saw and interacted with a lot of this new technology. The World's Fair in Philadelphia was big on technology, and they had a steam engine, like, you know, that would power an old steam locomotive, like a big steam engine. It burned coal and produced steam, and the steam caused things to move. And the engine that they built at the Philadelphia Convention was so powerful that it actually powered the whole fair. Any of the mechanisms that were used in the fair in conveying and opening and keeping things going and running kind of the gas pipes, like all of it was tied to this one steam engine that they built that was then a central part of the exhibition. It was really cool. I definitely think the 19th century ones were the coolest. Paris is where we get the Eiffel Tower, which is one of the few structures from these world exhibits that is left. And then in Chicago, we have the Ferris wheel, the world's first Ferris wheel, and it was huge. I mean, it wasn't huge by our standards of today, what we're used to seeing in big Ferris wheels, but imagine how big it would have been, overpowering the city the first time you see a big steel structure that people can ride on and it can move. And that was really what they were looking for in the Chicago World's Fair, was they wanted to be better than France. They wanted to be better than the Eiffel Tower. So they wanted it to be as impressive as a big structure, but then the Eiffel Tower just stands there. A Ferris wheel, people can ride on it and move. And so it was this step up. They were set to happen about every 10 years, Lucas. That's a good question. But they would pace them around big events. So like the 1871 was 1876 to be on the centennial. St. Louis hosted one in 1903, and that was the anniversary of Lewis and Clark leaving on their expedition. So it was called the Louisiana Purchase Expedition, the St. Louis one. So they're interesting like that. Okay, if I go over to the Padlet, am I going to see some cool things? Have you guys been working while I've been talking and listening to the carousel? I'm hoping. Yes. Oh, and someone got all kinds of cool and put GIF in. That's how you pronounce it, by the way. No one's ever going to convince me it's otherwise. Let me see. What do we have here? This is cool. So this looks like it's from the Philadelphia one. This right here, we've got the Crystal Palace. So the Crystal Palace is the tipping off point for this. And why it's called the Crystal Palace is it's made of glass. It's just these steel structures, which steel as a processed product that can withstand heat and time and a lot of weight and pressure becomes very common. The process becomes very streamlined and available in the late 1800s, which is how we get railroad ties out of this. Is also the process of refining and manufacturing steel on a large scale, but using the steel to make the outline of the Crystal Palace. So it's just like a skeleton, and then they filled in all the available space with glass. So going inside, it was like being in a greenhouse, but it was huge, like a shopping mall. And you could see through it everywhere, hence the name, the Crystal Palace. It got left up for a few years. They took it down and relocated it to a park, and then it was taken down again. I live in San Diego, which I don't know if you guys knew that, but I live in San Diego. And in 1915, California was supposed to host a World's Fair, and San Diego competed for it, and San Francisco competed for it, and they picked San Francisco. And I don't know if you do this, but the people of San Diego are a little bit stubborn. And so when San Francisco was picked for the World's Fair, San Diego was like, nah, we're gonna do our own. And so San Diego hosted this, what they called it, the Panama Expedition. It was a fake World's Fair, and they built what we call, it's Balboa Park is what we call it here. And it's a big park, and there's these buildings and facades, and there's all these museums, and they actually built a replica of the Crystal Palace. And it's still there as, it's like an indoor garden, like a conservatory. It's really cool. So I've been inside that, and it's pretty impressive to me now. And I can't imagine what it would have been like to be inside the actual Crystal Palace in the 1850s. That's crazy. Yeah, Lucas, Balboa Park is awesome. So 1915 was World War I for sure, but not for America. And so it was the Pan-American Expedition. So it was focused on South America and Latin America. So when they announced it and started planning for it, World War I hadn't happened yet. And they were like, oh, this will be great. And then World War I got started in Europe, and San Diego, again, being stubborn, was like, nope, we're still having our fake World's Fair, and we're just gonna invite South America. It'll be fine. And it was. So there's a story with that. Pretty fun. These are cool images you guys found. So the Ferris wheel built for Chicago stayed up for the fair, and then it was disassembled. It was too dangerous to be left up by itself. And oh, that's a good one of the Crystal Palace. You can really see the structure on that. That's good. What's interesting, going back to Lucas's comment earlier about how these buildings weren't permanent, the White City is what they called the Chicago World's Fair, because all of the buildings were built in a neoclassic style. So we're familiar with that, lots of columns, lots of simplicity, but they were built out of 2x4s and plaster. And so after the fair, the park was just kind of abandoned. And about a year later, the park caught fire, and it just burned down, like the whole thing, in about less than a full day, maybe 18 hours. There wasn't really anything they could do to stop it, and there wasn't anything there really worth saving because it was the remains of these buildings, and so it's gone. There's no real evidence of the Chicago World's Fair. Some of the other fairs, even though the structures were gone, there were evidence that remained, and then the idea of building a permanent symbol became more common, I guess. There's like the Seattle Space Needle. The World's Fair in 1940 in New York built this huge dome, like sphere called the Perisphere, and people could go inside it and ride like a little car around, and there was a fake city inside. It was really cool, but they took it down because that's what they do. These are awesome. Oh, this is a good one right here. Okay, fun stuff. You guys are finding good things. Well, I just wanted to kind of focus on how that technology gets put into play and how the architecture gets seen and spotlighted. Any more questions or comments about World's Fair? I've kind of done my little chit chat on it while you guys had a chance to research, but it's a really cool way of highlighting what a nation's working on. So maybe when we start talking about modernism, we can take a minute and pull up some of the more recent World's Fairs, because the architecture that comes from them is pretty cool. Okay, I'm gonna switch off of this. I'm gonna end our fun fair music. You guys are welcome to keep putting stuff up on the Padlet, but I wanna talk to you now about Art Nouveau, because Art Nouveau is awesome. And it doesn't get enough attention in the course as I thought, so I wanted to focus it on you. There's this idea that like post-industrial is all about the new technology, but with that new technology is this emphasis on science and nature. The style, I like it too, Emma. I think it's beautiful. I think it's interesting. One of the artists from the era once said that there are no straight lines or sharp corners in nature. Therefore, buildings must have no straight lines or sharp corners. And so that theme is a good art to carry through when you look at Art Nouveau, and keep out the idea that there shouldn't be straight lines. And I like this example that I posted with the birds, because there's no straight lines in there, really. But if you look at it, there are, because there's places where it mirrors and where it breaks, and there's that like really clear symmetry that kind of makes a line. Don't look at it too long then, Jocelyn. I don't want you to get a headache. But it's got all the curls in with the plants and the birds and the emphasis on that. So it's possible. And one of the architects that I want to talk about for a second, he worked in Barcelona, Spain, and he built some of the craziest buildings. I love them. I put up a backdrop of one of them today. This is inside a building he built called the Casa Mila. And he did it. He built buildings with no straight lines or square corners. How would you do that? How do you build a building that doesn't have any straight lines? Circles. That's a good idea. Build it with circles, build it with wheels. A dome. That's a really good idea, Jocelyn. Wiggly. Emma, I think that Gaudi, Antonio Gaudi, is the artist. He was listening to you. He really went with the wiggly kind of a phase. He is considered a Modernismo, which is just the Spanish kind of Art Nouveau. And so he built this building called the Casa Mila, which the interior looks like what's behind me. And I want to show you a little bit of a video about how he did it, like what the structure is behind it. So let me get this up. It should play for us. I want to skip ahead.
Considered to be pure eccentricity.
Okay, can you guys hear?
In 1860, the Cerda Plan, named after its author, was a town planning scheme to redesign and enlarge the city of Barcelona. Main thoroughfares were created, new avenues crisscrossing at right angles like Spanish garrisons. On one side of these wide, straight avenues, going right through the city from the center to its outer limits, Gaudi, breaking all the rules in force, set a wall on a soft slant instead of an angle. With this facade, he pushed the destructuration of an architecture based on line and right angle to its very limit. Gaudi, with his passion for anatomy, thought of his building as a body covered with a skin. The columns were to be the building's skeleton, the stone its flesh. The columns, dressed in stone, rise up 6 stories to the attics. These columns bear the weight of the building. This facade is not a load-bearing wall, but just a curtain wall inserted between the metallic elements that project from the main girders. There was nothing more to do than to fill up the spaces between the columns. Gaudi could add or subtract the blocks of stone as he liked, creating huge windows, 150 in all, and immense balconies. The facade could be adjusted at will. It could be sculpted, twisted, made to ripple in a continuous movement that gives the impression that the whole mass rides along in its own undulating rhythm. The facade of the Casa Mila became a piece of sculpture. The balustrades of the balconies are made from scrap iron. Not the usual material for a luxury building. This was in 1910, and we can feel a premonition of abstract art in these shapes, as well as a blend of archaism and modernism.
Gonna end the video there. You guys are fun. Life is a struggle, but we get through it. And just like the Casa Mila, we survive and we try and make the outsides beautiful. You guys are fun. So you saw in the structures how it held up because there was that strong steel frame. You've got that strong interior, those core pieces, and then the outside could be whatever you wanted it to be, which I guess keeping with the very existential theme that you guys have going in the chat, we've got those strong core values, strong ideals behind us, then we can shape the outside however we need to. We can present and be whoever we need or are. You guys are funny. Okay. So how did technology make the Casa Mila possible? How did changes in technology make it possible for him to build this? Welcome, Athena. That's okay, Athena. Yeah, Emma, it was faster. And because he could build it with like the steel structure, those steel pieces, he didn't have to worry about the weight being on the stones. And that's how come he's able to make the surface like flow and wobble and wiggly, like you said earlier, was because the surface of the stone didn't really matter. The outside of the building wasn't holding the building up. It was held up by those steel insides. So before there was steel production, it wouldn't have been possible. So the other name for this building was La Pedrera, which means like the quarry. Why would that be a name for this building, having looked at the outside of it? Yeah, Lucas, it's made of stone. It is made of stone, but so are a lot of buildings. So what was about the stone or this building? Quarried stone. No worries, Athena. Yeah, it was because the stone looked like it had been, you were getting closer. You're right on the track. It's because it looked like it had been quarried or worn away. That flow and the wiggly made it look like it had been exposed to wind and rain and the other elements of erosion. There was maybe a little sedimentary going on, or revealing the surface that uneven structure, like the arches and the way that it didn't have any corners, made it look like it had been worn. If you think about a stone that's like been in the river, or you find on the ocean that's got that shape, that it's worn, it's smooth, it's like that. Cement, Athena? He built with cement that he was able to shape to make that kind of a structure. He was influenced. You are here now. No one pick on Athena anymore. He was influenced by nature. And he really valued that and like the natural world. His other really famous structure is called the Sagrada Familia, and it's a Catholic cathedral, and it's not finished. He started working on it in the 1890s, and he worked on it until he died in 1926. And then people have continued to work on it, to fund it, because the architecture is done. The design is finished. It's supposed to be finished in 2026, which is coming up in just a few years. So people are getting really anxious. What would you expect to see on the outside of a cathedral? What kinds, because this is covered with relief sculptures, what kind of sculptures would you expect to see on the outside of a cathedral? Okay, Gothic things, a cross. Yeah, it's got a lot of religious structures. There are saints, there are pictures of Jesus, there are things from the Bible. Mary, there are wiggles. There are wiggles everywhere. There's jellyfish, there's seaweed, there's math symbols, there's philosophers and scientists carved into the walls, there's constellations, there's elephants, there's koalas, there's trees and honeybees and honeycombs. So much variety. There is not a Darth Vader. It is not the National Cathedral, unfortunately. But there is so much, and just so many things taken that you maybe wouldn't think of putting on the outside of a cathedral, that Gaudi has just like covered with this. And you see the way that the spires come up. You see there, like we're looking on that picture on the left, there's that central piece where the main entrance is, and then those spires, they twist and turn. And he was really inspired by like coral and how that would look under the ocean. If you think about the Little Mermaid's palace and how the coral looks, like that's what he was going for. Yeah, the head of squids, that would work. And if you look, you're looking at it, there's the two pillars on either side, and then that middle piece, you can see the scaffolding because they're still working on it. And that middle piece is where the top spire is supposed to be, and it's going to be twice the height of the church. The top spire is going to make it the largest, or the tallest, I should say, cathedral in the world. It'll make it taller than the current one, which is St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. So it's kind of like a castle. It's pretty cool. I think that Darth Vader would feel a little out of place because he's not as attuned to nature and the Art Nouveau scene as he is maybe to modernism. So maybe not him. You guys are funny. So tell me about the inside of the cathedral, that picture on the right. There's obviously something huge that stands out, and I just want someone to say it. Thank you, Mary. It's rainbows. The inside of the cathedral is so colorful. Like, I really want to go there just to see it in person because all the pictures make it look amazing. There are stained glass, obviously, like you would expect, but the colors that they used in the stained glass are all really, really bright. Primary colors, you're seeing that. Some secondary colors. And the inside, when the sun is up, is just bright and colorful. And inside the cathedral is really, really tall. And it's supposed to look like inside the canopy of a rainforest. That's the effect that they're going through. So it's this idea of taking the technology, having the steel to build these kind of things, and then this influence by art and the Art Nouveau especially to make it really unique, really unique. Yeah, it's different, right? You want to go there. So behind me is the inside of the Casa Mila, and you can see like the stained glass and the archways in here, which is pretty cool. But inside the Sagrada Familia is just rainbows, and it looks amazing. So, Lucas, that's not even a spoiler at this point. So just heads up. You're dating yourself there. Okay, speaking of stained glass and color, another place where we see technology come in with art in the post-industrial era is with Tiffany glass and making stained glass different. So how does the change in stained glass connect with realism and the post-industrial world? So what I'm asking is, how is this stained glass different from the stained glass that you saw when you were looking at medieval ages? Okay, bring it back and talk to me about how stained glass is different. No, I didn't mean to say not sad, Kennedy. It really is sad. That is a lamp. That is a lamp, Mary. It is a Tiffany lamp, and the image is supposed to look like grapes or lilacs. It is made of glass. Your grandma had a Tiffany lamp. That's awesome. And you know what? You guys just hit on exactly what I wanted. Before this, stained glass was really only used in churches. And Louis Company Tiffany, so they're Tiffany lamps because that's his name, he started to make lamps and other pieces of stained glass that could be used outside of religious purposes. Exactly, Emma. It changes from religious to modern. Most of the pieces do have that emphasis on nature, and they're able to produce it really fast, really quickly. The technology has changed so that they can produce it much easier. Because the production is easier, it's easier access for people, and it becomes something that can be in people's homes instead of something that you only see in a cathedral. So you guys are right on it there. Okay, how did changes in technology affect art? So I've got a big blank space on the screen. You guys can annotate, so pick up that little marker and draw or write for me. But how are some ways that technology has affected art? And it can be from something we've talked about or some kind of a guess, but how's technology affected art? And let me know if you're not able to annotate, but it should be turned on. Okay, you guys are, cool. You can't annotate, Athena? Okay, let me see. You can't either. Okay, that's weird. Some people can, some people can't. Let me see if I can adjust it for individuals. So Athena and Michaela can't. Do you, Athena and Michaela, do you guys have the little marker like on the black toolbar for Zoom? There should be like the little marker that says annotate. Do you guys have that? Oh, I bet, Emma. Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, view options. And if you take it out of full screen, you should be able to get it. Here you go. Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. Okay, great. Sorry, I have to look over here to read it, but made it faster, new things to draw, and a new way to create it. 3D printing, if we're talking about now, which is awesome. Okay, new artists in the, yeah, okay, and just access that people have. Art come to life, color, digital art is a thing. So we've seen technology change art, and having access to new tools and new technology allows artists to do things in other ways. So good job. Good job. Oh, let me clear that. So looking at one of the ways that we really see a change in technology in this time period, in the late 1800s and the post-industrial ages, with photography. Once photography is developed, it can become a type of art, and it can become something that can be used in different ways. So one of the artists that we look at is Matthew Brady, and he's really known for taking pictures during the Civil War and taking pictures of the battlefield and showing people what it looked like. So what surprises you or impresses you about these pictures? Obviously, the technology that allowed him to do this was being able to take his camera with him. Okay, enough Star Wars for today, please. But how did that? Mary comments on the high quality, especially like that top one. That is really clear. It's a really good quality photograph, and we maybe don't expect that from the era, but we are able to get them. Emma is a little bit, he's saying that they're a little shaggy. The men on the bottom are soldiers in the Civil War. Yes, Lucas. In addition to taking his Civil War photos, Matthew Brady was a portrait photographer. So he took pictures of lots of famous Americans of the era, including General Custer. He took a lot of the photographs that we see of Abraham Lincoln. So he was able to do both and kind of take those portrait photographs, just like the Custer is a good example, because he's dressed in what we would expect him to be wearing, no background, very clear, direct, portrait focus on it, just like we see in those realism photos or realism paintings we were looking at. That same kind of style crosses over to portrait photography. It's such a clear picture, right, Mary? Yes, he's very much posed. He went in to have his picture taken. So because of the technology, taking a photograph was not as easy as snapping a selfie, and so it required a lot of setup. So for the portrait photography, it would be very similar to meeting with a painter to have your portrait painted. So Custer definitely was part of the pose and dressed in the way he wanted this photograph to be. But then because Brady could take his camera with him, he was able to get some of these photos of the Civil War, of the battlefield when the action was over. And then a lot of wartime, unless you're on battle days, is camping and waiting and marching. And so he would take pictures of the men in the camps, and that's what that bottom one is. Another one I wanted to show you guys was Jacob Riis. And he, yeah, oh, Mary, thank you for bringing in our elements, talking about the dark and blacks and the contrast between the photographs here. And you can see that in these photos as well. So Riis took photos of people that were living in what would have been considered the slums then, or in shelters, and it looks a little bit grainy. Thanks, Emma. That's a really good point. So he would go into these places and take the photographs, and for the most part, he used a very innovative piece of technology. He would use flash photography, and he would use flash powder, like similar to gunpowder, to make the light and then take a photograph right away. So these pictures are not posed. They're not staged. For the most part, the people didn't know they were going to be photographed. So yeah, there's a lot of detail in the photos, but it is a little bit less quality because it's done with the flash. It's done indoors. Yeah, lighter on the edges and dark in the center because the light source is coming over from the side where he did the flash, so it's different in that way. Anything else surprising or stand out about these pictures? I love, by the way, you bringing in the elements and principles to talk about how the picture is done, because we can do that. We can still use the same language. Yeah, the people in the picture. Some of the people don't look awake because they weren't, or are just getting awake to get the picture taken. It does look a little tannish. Funny. Okay, one more I wanted to share with you, and that is Felix Nadar. So he was a portrait photographer. So he would take pictures of people, blah, 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 come in, sit down, get their photo taken. But then he got really interested in aerial photography. So what kind of technologies would allow him to expand his art if he's taking aerial views of things? Emma, that is a pigeon. He did. He tried having, it's a photographing pigeon. He rigged up a camera that he could strap to a pigeon, and he would have them fly over, and it was a homing bird, so the pigeon would come back to him and try and take pictures. Those didn't turn out quite as well as the ones he did using his hot air balloon. He would go up over all kinds of cities. He photographed all over the world and take these aerial shots from the air down onto the city, and it was a view that people had never been able to see before. And he did compose them the same way that we look for in a painting, focusing on symmetry and variety and an emphasis on some things. Yeah, he very much reminded me of the Wizard of Oz when I found this photo, so I wanted to be sure and share it with you. And the picture of the city that you can see there on his left, that's of Boston. And he named that piece As the Eagle Sees It. So a little tie into American history there. What do you think might have influenced his aerial photos? Why show the world this way? Yeah, he could have been interested in flight. This is the beginning of the era where that starts to be a real interest. We're only a few years away from the Wright brothers' flights. That could have been it. Okay. Emma being there in real life is a little bit better than being there in a video game. I bet he did go crazy over planes. He was excited about it. Also, he talks about how he was influenced by American Romanticism and the idea of showing the landscape in that huge dramatic kind of way. Think about the Hudson River School and the haze and the glow that they would use in their pictures. And he wanted to show that kind of in reality with a view that maybe people hadn't seen before. So that was a little bit with him. And then I have one more question for you guys, and that is, how will technology change art as we continue to get more and more advances in technology? How will we, what will that look like? What will art of the future look like? Yeah, oh, I love it. So online, holograms, virtual. Absolutely. Hop on mic, Kaylin. Anybody can get on the mic.
I think that like technology in the future is gonna like cause this like really cool thing. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen that new movie that where you put on a video game thing and on their eyes, and then they go into this other world. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I think that's it, Michaela. Ready Player One.
Ready Player One, and you'll be able to like go and make art or like and do stuff like you can do like all these new game designs, and like I love how all these new games are coming out, like Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider game, and it looks more human-like than a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Like their video game art has like developed so much, has changed so much over the years. I think it's like changed how art is, in my opinion.
I think that is a really, really good point. Like virtual art and the idea of a world where there are things and technologies that are going to be able to create all new kinds of art that we've never even considered before. I mean, imagine Da Vinci had no way of imagining what photography would be like. And virtual art is so new to us that it's hard to imagine what the next step's going to be. And that's a really good example, Kaylin, of what that virtual world can be. I want to address the chat. You guys are awesome. I love how passionate you are about it. I am really mad personally about Ready Player One because I didn't read the book and I wanted to, and I was going to read it. And then we got tickets to go see the movie, and I was like, oh, I'll see the movie. It'll be fine. And I saw the movie, did not enjoy it, and then it kind of ruined it for me. So I haven't read the book yet. So those of you, Mary, I'm looking at you with your all caps. Should I still read the book even if I saw the movie? Is it different enough that I would benefit from it? Okay. Perfect. That's all I needed to know. And this is actually our last point for the lesson today, so it's a good spot to end on. The website on the screen, you can't click on it, but you can type it in. It's yelke.com and then /national. It'll take you to a list of 16 current art critics and what they predict art will be like in the next 50 years. It's really interesting. I snagged 2 of the pictures to put up and show you. I love the guy painting the floating hologram, like landscape. That is amazing. So there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of new ideas that we're going to be able to see, hopefully. But it'll still come back to those same elements and principles, looking at the color and the shape and the balance, and is it aesthetically pleasing? All right, that is it for today. Any questions before we break up? Yes, it is real, Emma. Athena, it is real. Okay. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Keep up the good work. And if you need help with anything, let me know. Bye. Thank you. Bye. Oh, I can't read that because I saw the movie and I was told how terrible it was. So children are going to be very upset. Good point, Emma. Okay. Bye. Thanks, Michaela.